Hey, welcome to part 3. We're almost done here. I have a few more slides. So we talked about the raid on Harper's Ferry. That was 1859. The following year, we have an election. So the Democrats' official nominee was Stephen Douglas. He was, his platform was really to have a congressional slave code. So he was heavily trying to favor the South. Republicans had Abraham Lincoln, who was fairly moderate on slavery. His platform was largely based on economics, so tariffs, getting a homesteading bill, getting that northern transcontinental railroad built. And Lincoln did end up winning by 180 electoral votes, and he only needed 153 to win. The next highest was a guy named Breckinridge, who was the South's favorite, so Stephen Douglas was not their favorite. Breckinridge won 72, which was the next highest, which was really more than or less than half of what Lincoln got. Lincoln did, however, only receive less than 40% of the popular vote. So the South was pretty disheartened because the country had elected a president who was committed to stopping the expansion of slavery. Not stopping slavery itself, but stopping the expansion into free states. So here we are at secession, sorry, not succession. So Southerners' fears were growing. They were terrified of, a free state elected president. That seemed like the final nail in the coffin for the South. They were worried that the United States would start using federal aid to encourage states to voluntarily free enslaved workers. They also started having some pretty outrageous fears. They thought that the federal government would start sending more John Browns around to start slave insurrections. They said, and these are in some very sort of trashy news sources, that the U.S. would start freeing enslaved people and forcing reproduction between them and children of poor white people. And they were really worried that there would start be this government promotion of mixing of the races. All sorts of crazed ideas were floating around in the South. And South Carolina was really encouraging secession. So in 1860, at a convention, South Carolina unanimously passed a resolution to secede from the Union. And they were then followed by the rest of the Deep South. The Deep South being these states down here in the darker green color. South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Those are what we consider the Deep South. So in 1861, those 7 states organized the Confederate States of America, and they elected Jefferson Davis as their president. And the Upper South and the border states, so these lighter green are the Upper South, and these cream-colored ones, those are border states. They were waiting. They weren't making a decision on this. They were hoping that Congress would settle matters and they would not have to decide who they were siding with. So that takes us to Lincoln's inaugural address. In this inaugural address, he said that he would not interfere with slavery where it already existed. So he was not going to try and abolish slavery in the South. But he also said that the Union, the United States, was perpetual, and the government would continue to hold and possess federal property, whether or not it was in the South or the North, and they would continue collecting customs and duties and taxes from the South. He hoped it would restore unity, sort of saying, I know you guys have seceded, but that's not a thing. You can't do that. We are still the United States, and we're still collecting taxes, but then we have this Battle of Fort Sumter. So this is in Charleston, South Carolina, where, as Lincoln stated, he would continue to hold federal property, and Fort Sumter was federal property. They'd run out of food at Fort Sumter, and they were going to have to surrender to the Confederate States of America. So Lincoln wrote a letter to the governor of South Carolina saying that they were going to be delivering food and some supplies, but no weapons. This wasn't going to be a weapons delivery, just food so that they could survive. And Jefferson Davis told the commander of Charleston, to force the surrender of Sumter. Do not let those supplies in. And if they wouldn't surrender, to start opening fire. And so this battle began. It lasted 33 hours, and then eventually Fort Sumter had to surrender to the Confederates. And when this happened, Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to come and put down this rebellion at Fort Sumter. This is the beginning of the Civil War. This is the first battle. And when this happened, the 4 upper South states, so we'll go back to this map, these 4 states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, those 4 joined the Confederacy at that point. So they did end up taking sides, and they chose the South. And now we're at Civil War, which we'll talk about next week. So I hope you have a great week, and please remember, email me any questions, comments, concerns you may have. I'll see you next time.